The webinar will begin in 1 minute. Welcome, everyone. We are pleased that you have joined us for today's webinar titled Case Study, Business Continuation, and the Broncos. The webinar will last approximately 20 minutes, and at the end, you will be given an opportunity to receive supporting materials by email free of charge to you. You will also be told how you may email questions related to today's content to the presenter. Today's presenter will be Linus Sugis. Linus is the president of Advanced Underwriting Consultants. He and his team answer tax and technical questions posed by producers every day. Linus also spent 14 years working in the home office of a life insurance company in various roles. He also started, ran, and sold an estate planning law practice in the Nashville area. Linus will draw on his legal and life insurance experience during today's webinar, and here he is.
Thank you, Amber. Welcome, everyone. Glad you're here to join us today for the case study of business continuation in the Denver Broncos. We're going to get into that in just a second. Let me offer this overview before we do get started. We like to focus at Advanced Underwriting Consultants on topics related to business continuation planning, and the reason for that is that if you're a financial professional or an insurance professional and you're working with business owners, in my opinion, that's the best place to mine for ways to serve your clients, right? Because the vast majority of them have not made business continuation plans, and they need to. And even where they have made plans, in a lot of cases, those plans ought to be tweaked. And it's a fruitful area to really be able to serve your clients. And that's why we hit this topic a fair amount in our newsletters and also in our webinars. And today we're going to talk specifically about the situation that came up with the Denver Broncos over the past many years, and what lessons can be drawn from that are relevant for you. But before we get into that in any kind of depth, let's talk about and let's decide what we're going to talk about next month in December. Our webinars are free and open to everyone. They're the first Wednesday of every month, and December's will be on December 7th, Wednesday, December 7th. And the three choices that you have available to you are the IRS provides RMD relief for inherited IRAs. The second choice is what you ought to know about gift taxes. And the third choice is Stoli is still dead. And so what I'll do is I'll open the poll and ask you to cast your vote for what we're going to talk about next month. The poll is now open. Go ahead and cast your vote, and I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. Got a couple people yet who haven't voted, so if you want to vote, please go ahead and do that. We'll give you another couple seconds. All right, we're going to go ahead and close the poll, and next month we'll talk about the IRS providing RMD relief for inherited IRAs. As I mentioned, our webinars are on the first Wednesday of every month. Next month's will be on December 7th. At the same time, 11 a.m. Central. And by the way, if you ever miss one of our webinars, we do post them on our YouTube channel. We'll have more information about that at the end of the session. So let's go ahead. Let's talk about business continuation planning and the Broncos. We're going to talk a little bit about the history of the Denver Broncos ownership, the more recent history that's relevant for the business continuation issues that we're going to discuss. We're going to talk about the crisis that occurred in ownership that was at the end of that history. And we're going to talk about how it ended up being resolved in a way that probably wasn't the way that the owner expected, but it ended up being all right for the owner's family, for the Bolin family. So let's go ahead and get into it, and let's talk briefly about the history of the Broncos. And so in 1984, Pat Bolin bought the Broncos from Edgar Kaiser. In 1984, the price tag was $78 million. And 14 years later, Bolin sold a share of the team to John Elway. And Elway became part of management of the Broncos. Um, the seller, the 1984 seller, wasn't crazy about Elway buying into the team, and he decided to sue Bolin, saying that selling Elway violated the terms of the 1984 purchase agreement. But ultimately, the appellate court ruled in favor of the Bolin-Elway transaction and against Kaiser, and said it was all right for Elway to be a part owner of the team. So after that, in 2009, Pat Bolin created some estate planning documents that created a revocable living trust that ended up owning the team, also created some power of attorney documents. And not unrelated, I suppose, is the fact that rumors started in 2009 also that Pat Bolin was experiencing some memory loss. And so there was an apparent loss of capacity at the same time that the estate planning documents were put into place. In 2011, John Elway, who's in the front office, now hires John Fox as the coach of the Broncos. Unfortunately, in 2018, Annabelle Bolin, Pat's wife, is diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And then in 2019, Pat Bolin died. And so a lot of the drama that we're going to be talking about here in relationship to the Broncos and the business continuation situation really arises after about 2017, when it's clear to the family that Pat Bolin is in a tough way, that he and his wife are both, in a tough mental situation, and the family is kind of anticipating what will happen with the Broncos after Pat is gone. So all of that ends up, being part of the issue. So let's talk about what actually happened uh, after that became clear. After it was clear that Pat had lost his mental capacity, and the trustees of his revocable trust ended up managing the Broncos and some of the situation there. So in 2018, Pat Bolin's brother asks the Colorado court to remove the trustees of Pat's trust. And the trust is the owner of the Broncos, controls the Broncos. The trustees of the trust are not Pat. They are non-family members who are also involved in the management of the Broncos. And these folks are also hold power of attorney over Pat's personal financial affairs. So the trustees of the trust are also the power holders under the power of attorney. They are not family members. They are in the Broncos organization, and they control all the decisions pretty much related to the Broncos. Remember that Pat's still alive here, but he is impaired mentally, as is his wife. And so the management of the Broncos are really, in firm control of the Broncos organization. So also in 2018, Pat's daughter, Beth Wallace, announces she wants to take over the Broncos as the face of the franchise. She wants to succeed her father. Now, in his trust, Pat made clear that it was his intention for one of his family members to take over as the face of the organization. Now, Pat's got 7 kids, two of whom are from a prior relationship, and 5 of whom are with his current wife, Annabelle. And Beth, from his first relationship, announces she wants to succeed her father, and the trustees don't think that Beth is the right fit. And so Beth and her sister, full sister, Amy, initiate a lawsuit the following year to take on the trustees over their decision not to allow Beth to take over as the face of the franchise. Now, in 2019, what happens is that Brittany, one of Pat's daughters, with his current wife, Annabelle, right, announces her intention to be the face of the franchise. Now, the trustees like Brittany. They think she's a good fit. However, the trustees are savvy enough to say that all of the kids, all 7 kids, need to agree among themselves over who's going to be the face of the franchise, because the trustees don't want this to be a protracted court battle that will essentially hamstring the organization, hamstring Pat's estate. And so they really, take the position that the kids have to work things out among themselves. And in 2020, what happens is we get another party to the lawsuit, Edgar Kaiser. Edgar Kaiser's estate really says that Edgar's deal with Bolin has triggered a right of first refusal as a result of Pat's death and the subsequent transfer of the Broncos management. And so he sues to try to exercise a right of first refusal in the agreement that was entered into, 26 years prior. And they're trying to get some leverage and perhaps get some money out of what's going on with the family. So, the family members are in lawsuits. They are opposing each other in terms of who ought to control the Broncos, and it's certainly a situation that Pat Bolin would not have wanted to have his various kids being in opposition to each other over who ought to control the team and fighting with the hand-picked trustees of his trust, who are also members of Broncos management. So how is all of this stuff getting resolved? Well, what happens, first of all, in 2018, Bill Bolin's suit asking for the trustees to be fired based on an argument that there was undue influence, or that Pat lacked the mental capacity to do his estate planning documents years earlier. That suit is dismissed. So that part of it is solved. Also in 2018, the NFL begins its arbitration process to help decide which of the Bolin children will be named the face of the franchise. Now, that arbitration process is never finished. It begins, and the NFL does these things in private, so we don't know much about how that process worked with the league. In 2019, Beth and Amy, Pat's kids by his first marriage, voluntarily dismissed their lawsuit against the trustee. And the speculation there is it's probably because the family and management agreed that they were going to sell the team rather than get into a protracted and expensive legal battle which would enrich a bunch of lawyers. And ultimately in 2020, Kaiser's lawsuit is also dismissed. The court ruling that the agreement from 1984 was not affected by Bolin's death. So all of that gets resolved, and so what that does is it frees up the family to sell the franchise to an ownership group led by billionaire member of the Walmart family, Rob Walton. And reportedly, the price paid for the franchises, $4.65 billion for the Broncos. So the bad news is that the family will no longer be involved in ownership or running the Broncos. I suppose the consolation prize is that they've got $4.6 billion gross to deal with that disappointment. And so it ends up being a fairly happy ending for everyone. Certainly it's a new day for the Broncos. And so the Broncos, with ownership and management now being cleared up with new owners, they've got the ability to improve their franchise going forward. And just in case you weren't aware, after the Broncos won their last Super Bowl in 2015, they've had mostly losing seasons, including so far this year where they're 3-5. The Russell Wilson experiment so far has been a bit of a disappointment. Hopefully with stable ownership, stable management, they can improve going forward. And so the question is, what are the takeaways that we can take from this situation with the Broncos? What are the lessons that we can learn that we can perhaps pass on to our clients? The first thing is the obvious one. The Bolin family had hoped to retain control of the Broncos, ownership of the Broncos. Pat didn't make good enough plans prior to his incapacity and death, and his failure to make good enough plans played a role in the family drama that started with his incapacity. Family ended up suing, family ended up disagreeing. Ultimately, the family came together, and that was good. But they are no longer involved in ownership or management of the Broncos, and that's not what Pat had in mind when he put together the beginnings of his estate plan. This is a blended family. Pat had kids from a prior relationship and from his current marriage. Blended family issues make business continuation plans more complicated to put together and to implement. This is no exception. While the story has a reasonably happy ending, the fact that we have blended families here and those extra issues were not adequately accounted for in Pat's plan meant that the family would not continue in ownership of the Broncos. The third lesson is that litigation is a terrible way to sort out these issues. Having to decide these things in court leave virtually no one happy other than perhaps the lawyers. And making plans in advance, making solid and sensible plans in advance are the right way to go. Leaving it up to everybody who's left behind, including the courts, is a bad way to go. And here, although $4.6 billion sale price with those proceeds coming back to the family, that's a pretty happy ending. It could have gone the other way. We've certainly seen other situations with professional sports franchises where things have gone the other way. The timing was not as favorable. The circumstances were not as favorable. The family drama lasted longer because family couldn't figure out how to work together. We've certainly seen those situations where things didn't turn out happily. And so I think it's fair to continue to use the Broncos situation as an example for our business owning clients of a family business where things didn't work out as the original owner had hoped because of the failure to make adequate plans in advance. That's the lesson of the Broncos, or the main lesson from the Broncos, that I hope you'll take away from our session today. And at this point, I will say thank you for joining us again, and I'll turn the program back over to Amber to close us out. Amber?
Thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, if you would like to receive supporting materials, feel welcome to email us at asktheexpert@advancedunderwriting.com. You may also email questions related to today's webinar. Feel welcome to join us for the next webinar on the first Wednesday of next month, December 7th, at this same time. Next month's webinar will be titled IRS Provides RMD Relief for Inherited IRAs. You can also find an archive of past webinars on our YouTube channel, Advanced Underwriting Consultants. Please subscribe to our channel. It helps us to keep making free webinar content. Today's presentation will be posted on our YouTube channel by the end of this week. Finally, for more information about the services that advanced underwriting consultants offer, including phone consultation and newsletter licensing, feel welcome to contact us at 615-224-1291. That's 615-224-1291. Thanks again and best wishes for continued success.